Hello everyone, welcome to Druv Online Academy. In this part 2 revision of research aptitude, we can revise sampling techniques. Sampling is the procedure of selecting appropriate samples to collect data. We can see some basic terms related to sampling and then we can move on to probability and non-probability sampling techniques. Population and sample. So the entire group that we want to study about is our population, and the specific group in that population that we choose and collect data from is known as sample. For example, if a school teacher wants to study their school students' level of motivation, then all students in the school will form the population. But the specific students the teacher chooses to collect data from will be the sample. Number of samples or number of participants involved in a research study is known as sample size. And then comes parameter and statistic. So we can describe the characteristics of population and sample using various statistical measures. These measures can be mean, median, mode and standard deviation. If these measures describe the characteristics of population, then it is called parameter. If these measures describe the characteristics of sample, then it is called statistic. From this statistic, we can make an educated guess about the parameter. That is, from the characteristics of samples, we can make an educated guess about the characteristics of population. Inferential statistical methods help us in doing this. Sampling frame. This is the list of units we choose samples from, like a register or a directory. These are sampling frames which will have the entire list of individuals or units, and from that we can choose samples. Sampling error. This occurs when the chosen samples do not represent the entire population. And non-sampling errors, these are errors which are not related to the process of sampling. So these kind of errors could happen in data collection or data entry or in other stages, but not related with sampling. Now we'll see probability and non-probability sampling methods. In probability sampling method, all the units of the population, all the subjects or individuals of the population stand an equal chance of getting selected. In non-probability sampling method, not all units or subjects of the population has an equal chance of getting selected because their samples are selected on the basis of some need or criteria for the research. Simple random sampling. In this method, from a large population, samples are chosen randomly. It can be like picking a chit or using randomly generated number and so on. It is highly randomized and all the units of the population have an equal chance of getting selected. Next, systematic sampling method. In this method, from the population, every nth individual or unit is chosen as a sample. Like every 5th or 10th or 8th individual will be chosen as a sample. So this method is easy when we have a sampling frame, like a list of the units in a population. When we have that list, this method is easy to do. Stratified sample. This method is appropriate when the population is heterogeneous, meaning they are different in characteristics. They differ from each other. So when we have that kind of population, we can divide the population into different strata or groups according to some characteristics, say their age or employment status or educational qualification. And from that strata, from that group, samples can be selected randomly. This is stratified sampling. Cluster sampling. This method involves dividing the whole population into clusters and randomly selecting a cluster rather than individuals as samples. The whole of cluster is taken as a sample. Non-probability sampling methods. Here we have convenience sampling, purposive or judgment sampling, quota sampling and snowball sampling method. In convenience sampling method, the samples are chosen as per the convenience of the researcher. Who are easily accessible, samples who are easily available. Based on that, samples are chosen. Next comes judgment or purposive sampling. Here the researcher has a specific purpose in mind and choose samples who will fit in that particular criteria. So selection of samples is completely dependent upon the judgment or decision of the researcher. Next is quota sampling. So this shares some characteristics with stratified sampling. Here also the population is divided into subgroups, but a quota is allocated for each of the subgroup. Quota is nothing but number of items to be selected from each subgroup. So this quota is predetermined, but selection of samples to fill in that quota is up to the researcher to decide. Here there are two things to consider. One is that the groups are mutually exclusive. That is, an individual can become part of only one group. Second is size of the quota. So the size of quota for each subgroup, this has to be proportionate to size of that group in population. For example, say there are two subgroups, men and women. If the population consists of 60% of women and 40% men, the quota for that subgroup will also reflect the same percentage. There is also an extension of this quota sampling, which is dimensional sampling. Here the researcher takes into account several characteristics and makes sure that there is at least one person in the study representing each of those characteristics. Next is snowball sampling. Snowball sampling method is based on referral networks. For example, the researcher might have 4 or 5 samples, a few samples basically, and these few existing samples will help the researcher in identifying other samples who will be a potential match for this research. So this snowball sampling method can be used when samples are difficult to find or locate. Now we can revise questions, previous year questions. First question, the fishbowl draw is a method of drawing. Options: independent sample, structured sample, non-random sample and random sample. D is the right answer. Random sample. Fishbowl draw is a method that we use to randomly choose samples. Next question, snowball is the process of selecting sample using A. networks, B. groups, C. snowballs, D. computer programs. Option A, networks, is the right option. Through referral networks, we get samples in snowball technique. Next question, in case the population of research is heterogeneous in nature, which of the following techniques will ensure optimum representativeness of sample units? A. simple random sampling, B. stratified random sampling, C. cluster sampling, D. systematic sampling. When the population is heterogeneous in nature, meaning they have different characteristics, they differ in nature. In that case, we divide them into subgroups, strata, and that method is stratified random sampling. So second option is the right answer for this question. Next question. From the list given below, identify those which are called non-probability sampling procedures. Okay, they have given a mixture of probability and non-probability sampling procedure. First, simple random sampling. Second, dimensional sampling. 3, snowball sampling. 4, cluster sampling. 5, quota sampling. And 6, stratified sampling. Okay, simple random is a probability method. So 1 is ruled out. Second, dimensional sampling. This we saw that it's an extension of quota sampling. So that is a non-probability procedure. 2, okay. Snowball sampling is a non-probability. 3 is also there. Cluster sampling is a probability sampling procedure. So that we can leave out. 5, quota, it's a non-probability sampling procedure. And stratified is a probability sampling method. So 2, 3 and 5. Looking at the options here, 2, 3, 5. Okay, fourth, D is the right answer for this question. Last question. In which of the sampling methods units comprising its constituents are taken intact rather than individually, where samples are selected as groups rather than individually? Okay, cluster, simple random, systematic and dimensional. In option 2, 3 and 4, in simple random, systematic and dimensional, samples are selected individually, but in cluster we take it as whole group. So 1 is the right answer for this question, cluster sampling method. With that, we come to an end for this video. Please do stay tuned to watch more videos on research aptitude, like and share our videos, and subscribe to Druv Online Academy. Thanks for watching.